The transport ship carried 47 teams to the first challenge world. Through the small windows, the Class 1 planet looked like a perfect green and blue marble. White clouds swirled around continents covered in forests and grasslands. "It looks like Earth," Soo-young said, pressing her face to the window. "Earth without the bad weather," Hye-jin corrected, checking her instruments. "No storm systems. No extreme temperature zones. The air is actually cleaner than what we breathe in Seoul." The ship landed in a wide meadow filled with flowers. When the doors opened, warm air flowed in. It smelled like spring morning after rain. The humans stepped out and looked around. Other teams were already setting up their camps. The Vorthons had brought machines that projected energy shields around their area. The Nethys were spraying some kind of mist to keep their skin wet. The Corvin were complaining loudly that the ground wasn't hot enough for their rock-like feet. "This is supposed to be challenging?" Jae-won asked. He picked up a handful of soil. It was rich and dark, perfect for growing plants. The challenge was simple. Each team had to survive for 72 hours while completing basic tasks. Find water, build shelter, gather food, and make fire. The teams that succeeded would move on to Class 2. Do-hyun looked at his watch. "We have 3 days to impress the judges. Let's not waste time." Within an hour, the humans had found a clean stream, built a sturdy shelter from fallen branches, and started a fire using flint and steel from Jae-won's kit. Other teams were still setting up their complicated equipment. The Vorthons watched the humans work. Their crystal bodies sparkled in the sunlight as they pointed at the simple human shelter. "Look at that," one of them said. "They're building with sticks and mud like primitive animals. Maybe that's all they know how to do," another replied. The human shelter was small and plain compared to the Vorthon energy dome or the Nethys floating bubble habitat. But when the first night came, a gentle rain began to fall. The human shelter stayed perfectly dry inside. Water rolled off the slanted roof exactly as Jae-won had designed it. The Vorthons had to boost power to their energy shields. The Nethys loved the rain but had trouble keeping their equipment working. 3 smaller alien teams had to huddle inside emergency shelters that barely kept the water out. On the second day, the humans explored the area around their camp. The plant life was amazing. Trees with silver bark grew next to bushes covered in purple fruit. Strange birds sang in languages that sounded almost like music. "This is beautiful," Hye-jin said. She was collecting samples of local plants. Many of them were good to eat. Others had properties that could be used for medicine or tools. Soo-young climbed a tall tree to get a better view of the landscape. Through her binoculars, she could see other teams struggling with basic tasks. A group of lizard-like aliens were trying to start a fire, but couldn't figure out how to keep it burning. Some flying creatures that looked like metal butterflies were having trouble staying on the ground in the light breeze. "How are we doing compared to everyone else?" Do-hyun asked when Soo-young climbed down. "We're doing the best," she said. "Most of the other teams are treating this like it's incredibly difficult. They're using all kinds of technology for things we can do with our hands." By the 3rd day, the humans had not only completed all the required tasks, but had improved their campsite significantly. Jae-won had built a system to collect rainwater. Hye-jin had identified dozens of edible plants and made natural medicines from local herbs. Soo-young had mapped the entire area and found the best routes to water and food sources. Do-hyun had organized everything so efficiently that they were spending most of their time relaxing. The judges were a group of different aliens who flew around in small aircraft, watching each team. When they visited the human camp, they seemed surprised. "You appear to be quite comfortable," said the lead judge, a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. "Yes, sir," Do-hyun replied. "This is a pleasant world." "Pleasant?" The judge made some notes on his device. "Most teams find Class 1 worlds challenging because they must adapt to unfamiliar conditions." Hye-jin stepped forward. "With respect, sir, this world is very similar to the conditions we're used to on Earth." The judge looked confused. "But Earth is classified as a Class 5 death world. Surely you required significant technology to survive there." The 4 humans exchanged glances. "Not really," Jae-won said. When the 72 hours ended, 43 teams had successfully completed the Class 1 challenge. 4 teams had failed because they couldn't adapt to the extreme conditions of mild weather and clean air. The Class 2 world was different. Darker clouds covered the sky and the wind was stronger. When the transport ships landed, rain was falling steadily. The temperature was about 5 degrees Celsius and the wind made it feel colder. "Now this looks more challenging," announced Ambassador Thektar over the communication system. Class 2 worlds feature dynamic weather systems and less stable environmental conditions. The Vorthons immediately deployed larger energy shields. The Nethys created enclosed habitat bubbles. The Corvin began heating the ground around their camp with some kind of thermal device. The humans looked around and shrugged. "Feels like autumn in Korea," Soo-young said. They set up their camp quickly. This time Jae-won built the shelter with a steeper roof and better drainage. The wind was strong, but nothing compared to the typhoons they were used to on Earth. The rain was heavy, but it was just water, not the acid rain that fell in some parts of Earth's industrial regions. Other teams struggled more with Class 2. The weather changed every few hours. Sunshine would give way to thunderstorms, then to hail, then back to sunshine. Many aliens had to constantly adjust their equipment. The humans adapted easily. When it rained, they collected water. When the sun came out, they dried their gear. When it hailed, they took shelter and waited for it to pass. They had learned these skills as children growing up on Earth, where weather could change quickly and without warning. On Class 2, 15 more teams were eliminated. Some couldn't handle the temperature changes. Others were defeated by the storms. A few gave up when their technology failed in the wet conditions. Class 3 was where things became extreme according to galactic standards. The planet was covered in snow, and the temperature was -20°C. Wind howled across frozen plains at 120 kilometers per hour. "Finally," said the Corvin leader as his team disembarked, "something that might challenge us." Most of the remaining teams deployed serious cold weather gear. Heated suits, insulated shelters, and devices to melt snow for drinking water. The judges announced that this was where many teams would reach their limits. The humans stepped out of their transport wearing the same basic gear they had brought from Earth. Heavy coats, insulated boots, and winter gloves, the kind of equipment any Korean would own for getting through winter. "This is it?" Jae-won asked, looking around at the snowy landscape. "This is what they call extreme cold?" Hee-jin checked her thermometer. "It's -20. That's actually warmer than Seoul gets some winters." They built their camp using techniques they had learned in Earth's mountain regions. Jae-won showed them how to build walls from packed snow that would block the wind but still allow air to circulate. Hee-jin found ways to identify safe ice for drinking water. Soo-young set up communication equipment that worked even in the electrical interference from the constant storms. Other teams watched in amazement. As the humans moved through the blizzard without any apparent difficulty, the Vorthons had to use energy heaters to keep their crystal bodies from cracking in the cold. The Nethys could barely function and had to create completely enclosed, warm environments. "How are they doing that?" asked one of the metal butterfly aliens. Its wings were covered in ice, and it could barely fly. "They're acting like the cold doesn't bother them," replied a lizard-like creature whose scales had turned blue from the low temperature. By the end of Class 3, only 28 teams remained. The humans were not just surviving, but seemed to be enjoying themselves. They had built the most efficient camp, collected the most resources, and completed all their tasks ahead of schedule. The judges visited their camp again. This time more of them came and they asked more questions. "Your species seems remarkably well adapted to cold environments," said the lead judge. "We're used to it," Do-hyun replied. "But how?" "Earth's climate data shows mostly temperate conditions. Earth has many different climates," Hee-jin explained. "Where we come from, winter temperatures below -20 are normal. We learn to deal with cold weather from childhood." The judges made many notes. Some of them whispered to each other in their own languages. Class 4 introduced something new: poisonous air. The atmosphere contained gases that were toxic to most species. Everyone except the humans had to wear breathing apparatus or environmental suits. "Finally," said several alien team leaders, "now the mammals will need technology like everyone else." The humans tested the air with simple chemical detectors from their kit. The poison levels were significant but not deadly for short exposure. More importantly, the toxins were similar to the air pollution in Earth's major cities. "It's like breathing in downtown Seoul during rush hour," Soo-young said, coughing slightly. "Or standing downwind from a chemical plant," Jae-won added. The transport ship dropped out of hyperspace with a soft hum. Captain Lee Do-hyun pressed his face to the small window and stared at the massive space station floating in front of them. It was bigger than any city he had ever seen on Earth. Thousands of ships from different worlds were docked around it like tiny insects around a giant metal flower. First time seeing Zerion Station? Asked Dr. Park Hyejin from the seat next to him. She was looking at her data pad, reading files about the other species they would meet. Yes, Do-hyun said. It's huge. Behind them, Sergeant Kim Jae-won was checking his equipment for the 10th time. He was a big man with rough hands from years of building things and breaking them apart. I still can't believe they invited us, he said. Lieutenant Nam Soo-young looked up from her communication device. Earth only got invited because we found that alien probe last year. They had to include us in the Galactic Confederation. The 4 humans were Earth's first team in the survival championship. Every 3 years, different alien species sent their best fighters to compete on dangerous worlds. The winners got better trade deals and more respect in the galaxy. The losers went home with nothing. Their ship docked with a loud clang. The airlock opened with a hiss of air. Do-hyun stepped out first, followed by his team. The docking bay was full of aliens. The first group they saw made Do-hyun's eyes widen. The Vorthans were 8 feet tall and looked like they were made of living crystal. Their bodies sparkled under the station's lights. Blue energy flowed through their transparent skin like glowing blood. One of the Vorthans noticed the humans and made a sound like breaking glass. The others turned to look. Their leader, a giant crystal being with golden light inside his chest, walked over to them. So these are the famous Terrans, he said. His voice sounded like wind chimes. He looked so small and soft. Are you sure you can handle more than a light rain? The other Vorthans made their glass-breaking laugh. Some aliens from other species stopped to watch. Do-hyun kept his face calm, but Jae-won's hands turned into fists. We'll do our best, Do-hyun said politely. Your best? The Vorthan leader bent down to look at Do-hyun closer. Little creature, we come from a world where the air itself can cut stone. Our children play in storms that would tear your bodies apart. You should go home before you get hurt. More aliens gathered around them. Do-hyun saw the Nethys, who looked like giant jellyfish that could somehow walk on land. Their clear bodies pulsed with green light. One of them spoke in a voice that sounded like water flowing over rocks. Humans cannot even breathe underwater, it said. How can they survive on worlds where the very ground burns with acid? The crowd grew bigger. Do-hyun recognized the Corvin from the files Hyejin had shown him. They were the champions of the tournament for the last 50 years. The Corvin looked like walking rocks with red-hot cracks running through their bodies. Their leader had arms as thick as tree trunks and eyes that glowed like coals. Mammals, the Corvin leader said, and his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. We have studied your species. You need water every few hours. You die if the temperature gets too hot or too cold. You cannot even see in the dark without tools. Why are you here? Hyejin stepped forward. She was the smallest of the 4 humans, but she did not look scared. We're here because we qualified, just like everyone else. The Corvin made a sound like lava bubbling. Qualified? Your world is barely a Class 5 death world. We come from Class 9. The difference between us is like the difference between a flower and a volcano. Class 12, Soo-young said quietly. What? The Corvin leader leaned forward. Nothing, Do-hyun said quickly, giving Soo-young a sharp look. She was just reading the station directory. An announcement echoed through the docking bay in several alien languages. Finally, it came in English. All tournament participants report to Assembly Hall 7 for orientation. The crowd began to move. As they walked through the station's corridors, more aliens pointed at the humans and whispered. Some laughed. Others looked confused, as if they couldn't understand why such weak-looking creatures were allowed in the tournament. Assembly Hall 7 was enormous. Thousands of aliens sat in rows of seats that went up so high Do-hyun couldn't see the top. The humans found 4 empty seats near the back. A massive alien walked onto the stage. It had 6 arms and skin that looked like metal. Its 4 eyes glowed yellow as it looked out at the crowd. Welcome, warriors of the galaxy, it said. Its voice boomed through speakers. I'm Ambassador Thektar of the Hegemony. For those who don't know, I will explain the rules of the Survival Championship. A hologram appeared above the stage showing a beautiful green planet. We start with Class 1 worlds. These are garden planets with mild weather and no dangerous animals. Almost every species can survive here easily. The planet in the hologram changed. Now it showed a world with bigger storms and rougher terrain. Class 2 worlds are harder. The weather is more violent. The ground is less stable. The images kept changing, as Thektar explained. Class 3 worlds had extreme heat and cold. Class 4 worlds had poisonous air. Class 5 worlds had deadly storms that could kill with lightning or crushing winds. Most species drop out by Class 6, Tektar said. The hologram now showed a world where the ground shook constantly, and mountains exploded with lava. Only the strongest survived to Class 7. The images got worse. Class 8 worlds had gravity so heavy it could crush bones. Class 9 worlds were covered in active volcanoes and acid rain. Do-hyun noticed that the Corvin looked proud when Class 9 appeared. The mighty Corvin are our current champions, Tektar continued. They have survived Class 10 challenges 3 times. No other species has ever succeeded past Class 9. The hologram showed Class 10. It looked like hell itself. The entire planet was on fire, with winds that could strip flesh from bone and pressure that could flatten metal. Classes 11, 12, and 13 exist in theory only, Tektar said. No species has ever attempted them. They may be impossible for any form of life. Do-hyun felt his teammates tense beside him. Earth scientists had secretly classified their own planet as Class 12, but they had told no one in the galaxy. If other aliens knew that humans lived on a world that dangerous, they would either fear them or not believe it. The tournament begins tomorrow, Tektar announced. Teams will be eliminated as they fail to survive each world class. The last team standing wins control of 3 star systems and preferred trade status throughout the galaxy. The assembly broke up into smaller groups. Aliens gathered around their species teams to plan and prepare. The humans sat alone. Did you see how they all looked at us? Jaewon asked. Like we're some kind of joke. Soo-young agreed. Yejin was still reading her datapad. According to this, the average Class 1 world has surface temperatures between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius. Gravity is about 0.8 Earth normal. The air is slightly thinner than what we breathe at home. Sounds like a nice vacation spot, Do-hyun said. The Class 2 worlds get up to 40 degrees Celsius and down to -10. Gravity goes up to 1.2 Earth normal. Some storms with winds up to 80 kilometers per hour. Jaewon snorted. I've been in worse storms in Busan. Class 3 is where it gets extreme, Yejin continued. Temperatures from -30 to 60 degrees Celsius. Gravity up to 1.5 Earth normal. Winds up to 150 kilometers per hour. Soo-young looked around to make sure no aliens were listening. Should we tell them that's just a normal winter day in Seoul? No, Do-hyun said firmly. Let them underestimate us. It will give us an advantage. A group of Vortons walked past their seats. One of them stopped and looked down at the humans. I heard that humans cry when they get wet, it said to its friends. Tomorrow should be entertaining. They walked away laughing their glass-breaking laugh. I'm starting to dislike them, Jaewon said. Stay focused, Do-hyun told his team. Tomorrow we show them what humans can really do. That night the 4 humans ate dinner in their small quarters on the station. The food was strange but edible. Through their window they could see the stars and the transport ships arriving with more alien teams. Are you nervous? Soo-young asked. Do-hyun thought about it. No, I'm curious. We've been the new species, the unknown ones. Tomorrow we find out if growing up on Earth made us as tough as we think we are. Hyejin looked up from her notes. According to the files, most species need special equipment starting at Class 3. Environmental suits, breathing apparatus, temperature control systems. What about us? Jaewon asked. We'll see how long we can go with just our regular gear. Outside their window, the galaxy waited. Thousands of aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of. Tomorrow, they would start learning how wrong they were. Do-hyun closed his eyes and tried to sleep. In his dreams, he was back in the Korean mountains during winter, training with his Special Forces unit. The snow was knee-deep and the wind cut through his gear like knives. His squad leader had said something that stuck with him. The mountain doesn't care if you're tired or cold or scared. It just tests you. If you're strong enough, you live. If not, you don't. Tomorrow, the galaxy would test them. Do-hyun smiled in his sleep. Earth had been testing humans for millions of years. They were ready. The Class 6 world looked like something from a nightmare. The ground shook constantly as massive earthquakes split the landscape. Volcanoes erupted in the distance, throwing burning rocks into the red sky. The air shimmered with heat, and the smell of sulfur was so strong it made eyes water. Now we enter true Death World territory, announced Ambassador Tektar over the ship's communication system. Class 6 worlds are where most species reach their absolute limits. Of the 7 remaining teams, 3 immediately began setting up major protective equipment. The Vorthons deployed energy barriers that could withstand falling debris. The metal butterfly creatures created a magnetic field to deflect the burning rocks falling from the sky. The shadow beings formed a dome of darkness around their camp. The Corvin looked excited. Their rock-like bodies seemed comfortable with the heat and shaking ground. "Finally," their leader said. "A world that feels like home." The Nethys team was in serious trouble. Their jellyfish-like bodies needed moisture, but the air here was so dry and hot that they had to seal themselves inside a completely enclosed environment system. The humans stepped off their transport and looked around. The ground beneath their feet trembled constantly. In the distance, a mountain exploded, sending a shower of lava into the air. "Feels like that time we trained near Mount Hala when it was acting up," Jaewon said, adjusting his pack. "The air's a bit thin," Heejin noted, checking her instruments, "but not worse than high-altitude training in the Himalayas." They had all experienced earthquakes on Earth. Korea sat on several fault lines, and tremors were a normal part of life. The constant shaking here was stronger, but not so strong that they couldn't function. Soo-young found a spot between two large rocks where they would be protected from falling debris. Jaewon began building a shelter that could flex with the ground movement instead of fighting it. He had learned this technique after the big earthquake in Gyeongju, where flexible buildings survived while rigid ones collapsed. The heat was intense, nearly 45 degrees Celsius, but the humans had trained in desert conditions. They knew how to work in extreme heat, how to conserve water, and how to recognize the signs of heat exhaustion. Other teams watched in disbelief as the humans set up their camp without any major protective systems. Just basic gear, smart positioning, and techniques for dealing with unstable ground. "How are they doing that?" asked one of the Vorthans. Its crystal body was protected by multiple layers of energy shielding. "They're not using any protective technology," replied the shadow being. "They should be dead by now." The first major test came on the second day. A massive earthquake, measuring what would have been 7.2 on Earth's scale, split the ground just 50 meters from the human camp. Other teams' equipment was damaged or destroyed. Emergency shelters collapsed. The Nethys team had to be evacuated back to their ship. The humans rode out the earthquake by staying low and moving with the ground instead of fighting it. Their flexible shelter bent and swayed but didn't break. When the shaking stopped, they emerged and continued their work as if nothing had happened. "I've seen worse in Pohang," Do-hyun said, checking his team for injuries. Everyone was fine. The judges circled overhead in their flying vehicles, making urgent notes. Some of them were speaking rapidly into communication devices, apparently reporting to their superiors. On the third day, one of the volcanoes erupted much closer to the camps. Burning rocks the size of cars flew through the air. The temperature jumped to over 50 degrees Celsius. Poisonous gases mixed with the air. The metal butterfly creatures couldn't handle the combined heat and toxic air. Their technology failed and they had to retreat to their ship. That left 6 teams. The shadow beings created a larger dome of darkness to protect themselves, but the effort was draining their energy. They were struggling to maintain their protection. The humans simply moved their camp to a position where the wind carried the toxic gases away from them. They used the same kind of masks they had worn on Class 4, plus simple techniques for avoiding the worst of the falling debris. "This is starting to remind me of home," Jaewon said as he watched lava flow down a distant mountainside. "Home doesn't have lava," Soo-young pointed out. "No, but remember the ash clouds when that chemical plant exploded? And the ground shook for days after the gas line ruptured." Heejin was taking notes on her data pad. "The environmental conditions here are actually less variable than what we deal with on Earth. It's hot and shaky and toxic, but it's consistently hot and shaky and toxic. On Earth, we have to deal with sudden changes. The Corvin were doing well on Class 6, but they were working much harder than the humans. Their technology was specifically designed for volcanic worlds, and they were using all of it. The humans were just adapting to the conditions with basic skills. By the end of Class 6, the shadow beings had exhausted themselves and withdrew. 5 teams remained: the humans, the Corvin, and 2 Vorthon teams. The transport to Class 7 was quieter than previous flights. The remaining alien teams were no longer joking about the weak humans. They were staring at them and whispering in their own languages. Class 7 was worse than anything they had seen before. The gravity was crushing, nearly 3 times Earth normal. The atmosphere was thick with superheated methane that would melt most metals. The pressure was so intense that it felt like being at the bottom of Earth's deepest oceans. One Vorthan team took one look at the conditions and refused to leave their ship. "This is impossible," their leader declared. "No biological life form can function in these conditions." The second Vorthon team deployed the most advanced environmental suits anyone had seen. Powered exoskeletons to deal with the gravity, complete atmospheric isolation, and cooling systems to handle the incredible heat. The Corvin were in serious trouble for the first time. Their rock-like bodies could handle the heat, but the crushing gravity was too much even for them. They had to use mechanical assistance just to move. The humans stepped out of their transport wearing reinforced gear and breathing apparatus, but nothing like the massive environmental suits the other teams used. The gravity hit them immediately. It felt like having 2 extra people sitting on their shoulders. Every step required enormous effort. But they had trained for this. "Remember the centrifuge training?" Do-hyun asked, breathing heavily. "And the deep-sea simulation," Hyejin added. "This is like being 60 meters underwater, but with heat instead of cold." They moved slowly but steadily. The crushing gravity was terrible, but humans had evolved on a world where they sometimes face similar pressures. Deep underwater diving, high-speed aircraft, extreme altitude changes. Earth had taught them to function when their bodies were under incredible stress. The superheated atmosphere was more challenging. The methane would have been instantly fatal without breathing gear, and the heat would have cooked them. But they had experience with environmental suits from Earth's most dangerous industrial sites and research stations. Most importantly, they knew how to pace themselves. The other teams were trying to work at normal speed and exhausting themselves quickly. The humans worked slowly and steadily, conserving their strength. On the second day, the remaining Vorthon team had to quit. Their environmental suits couldn't handle the combined heat and pressure. The power systems overloaded, and they barely made it back to their ship alive. The Corvin were struggling badly. Their leader could barely move, even with mechanical assistance. The crushing gravity was literally breaking their rock-like bodies apart. The humans were having the hardest time of the tournament so far, but they were still functioning. They built a simple shelter that could withstand the pressure. They found ways to collect moisture from the atmosphere for drinking water. They completed all the required survival tasks. "How?" asked the Corvin leader when he saw the humans working near their camp. "How are you still moving?" "Earth is a heavy world," Do-hyun replied simply. "We're used to working under pressure. But the gravity here is 3 times your world's gravity." "Yes," Hyejin said. "It's very uncomfortable. But we've trained in conditions like this." The Corvin looked confused. "What kind of training?" "Deep ocean work. High-speed flight. Emergency situations where we have to function when our bodies are under extreme stress." By the third day, the Corvin team leader made an announcement that shocked everyone. Listening to the communication channels, "We withdraw from Class 7. It was the first time in tournament history that the Corvin had been eliminated. They were the Galactic champions, the masters of surviving on death worlds, and they couldn't handle what the humans were enduring. 4 teams had started Class 7. Only 1 team remained, the humans. The judges' flying vehicles circled constantly now. Ambassador Tektar's voice came over the communication system every few hours, asking if the humans needed medical assistance or wanted to withdraw. "We're fine," Do-hyun reported each time, "just taking it slow." The transport to Class 8 carried only the 4 humans and a very worried group of tournament officials. The judges had been in constant communication with their superiors. Something was happening that had never happened before in galactic history. Class 8 was a tidally locked world. One side faced its sun constantly and was hot enough to melt lead. The other side faced away and was so cold that the atmosphere froze into snow. The news of humanity's Class 8 survival spread through the galaxy, faster than light-speed communication. By the time the humans returned to Zerion Station, crowds of aliens had gathered to see them. Not to mock them this time, but to stare in wonder at beings who had achieved the impossible. Ambassador Tektar met them at the docking bay personally. His 4 yellow eyes were wide with something that looked like fear. "Class 9 has been the Corvin domain for 300 years, he said without any opening pleasantries. "No other species has ever survived it. Are you certain you want to attempt it?" Do-hyun looked at his tired but determined team. They had come this far. Earth was counting on them. More than that, they were curious to see what the galaxy considered truly impossible. "We'll try," he said. Tektar made a sound like grinding metal. "The tournament officials have been in emergency session for 2 days. Some want to end the competition now and declare you the winners. Others want to see how far you can go. What did they decide? Class 9 will proceed, but we're implementing new safety protocols. Medical teams will monitor you constantly. Emergency evacuation will be available at any moment. If you show any signs of distress, you'll be pulled out immediately. Hyejin stepped forward. With respect, Ambassador, we've made it this far without special treatment. We don't need it now. Dr. Park, Thektar said, using her name for the first time. Class 9 is not just another level of difficulty. It's a volcanic hell world where the Corvin feel at home, because they evolved from living rock. The surface temperature averages 200 degrees Celsius. The air is pure sulfur dioxide. The ground is mostly liquid lava with islands of cooling rock that shift constantly. Most species would die just from stepping outside their ship. We understand, Do-hyun said calmly. Do you? Thektar's voice rose. We've been studying your species files since Class 6. Earth is not a Class 5 death world as originally classified. Our xenobiologists estimate it's at least Class 8, possibly Class 10. But Class 9 is specifically designed for silicon-based life forms. You're carbon-based organisms. This should be impossible. The humans exchanged glances. Their secret was out now. Earth is Class 12, Soo-young said quietly. Thektar's forearms went rigid. That's not possible. Class 12 worlds cannot support complex life. Yet here we are, Jae-won said. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Thektar made that grinding noise again. The transport to Class 9 leaves in 6 hours. Use that time to rest and prepare. You're going to need it. The humans spent those 6 hours checking their equipment and reviewing everything they knew about volcanic environments. Earth had plenty of active volcanoes and human scientists had studied them extensively. More importantly, humans had lived near volcanoes for thousands of years and learned to survive their eruptions. The temperature is going to be the biggest challenge, Hyejin said, reviewing her notes. 200 degrees Celsius is hot enough to boil water instantly, but not hot enough to melt our equipment, Jae-won replied. And we've worked in foundries that got almost that hot. The sulfur dioxide will be toxic, Soo-young added, but we have breathing gear that can handle it. The real problem will be the unstable ground, Do-hyun said. If we're walking on cooling lava that can shift without warning, we need to stay mobile and ready to move fast. The Class 9 world looked exactly like Thektar had described. Rivers of lava flowed between islands of black volcanic rock. The entire planet was covered in active volcanoes that threw fountains of melted rock into the orange sky. The air shimmered with heat, and everything glowed with the light of burning stone. The humans' transport landed on one of the larger rock islands. The moment the doors opened, the heat hit them like a physical blow. Even with their protective gear, it was like standing inside an oven. The Corvin had been right. This was their kind of world. Their previous teams had built permanent structures here, carved shelters directly into the volcanic rock, and established supply caches that could last for months. The humans had no such advantages. They were visitors on an alien world, carrying only what they could fit in their packs. But they had advantages the Corvin didn't know about. Humans had been dealing with volcanic environments longer than any other species in the galaxy. Earth's early humans had lived through supervolcanic eruptions that covered continents in ash and changed the climate for decades. Those experiences were encoded in human DNA and passed down through generations of survival knowledge. Within hours, the humans had established a base camp using techniques learned from volcanology teams on Earth. They chose a position on high ground where they could see lava flows approaching. They built heat shields using local volcanic glass and metal from their own equipment. They created air filtration systems that could handle the sulfur dioxide. Most importantly, they learned to read the volcanic activity. Every eruption followed patterns. Every lava flow had predictable behaviors. The planet seemed chaotic, but it actually followed rules that could be understood and anticipated. The monitoring teams watched in amazement as the humans not only survived, but began moving around the volcanic landscape with confidence. They mapped safe routes between lava flows. They found sources of clean water in underground steam vents. They even discovered edible minerals that could supplement their food supplies. They're treating it like a camping trip, one of the judges reported to Thektar. A camping trip? Thektar's voice was incredulous. They've built a comfortable shelter, established reliable food and water sources, and are exploring the area around their camp. Yesterday, one of them was collecting lava samples like souvenirs. On the fourth day, something unprecedented happened. A massive eruption occurred just 2 kilometers from the human camp. It was the kind of volcanic event that would have forced even the Corvin to evacuate. Lava bombs the size of buildings flew through the air. A new lava flow began moving directly toward the human position. Every monitoring team expected to see an emergency evacuation. Instead, they watched the humans calmly pack their essential gear and move to a new location they had already scouted as a backup site. They relocated their entire camp in less than 2 hours and were settled in their new position before the lava flow reached their old campsite. How did they know? Thektar asked the monitoring team. They said the ground vibrations changed pattern 12 hours before the eruption. They felt it coming and prepared for it. They felt it coming? Sir, I think these humans understand volcanic activity better than our instruments do. By the end of the Class 9 challenge, the humans had not only survived, but had thrived. They had explored more of the planet than any previous team. They had collected scientific data that would be valuable to geologists throughout the galaxy. They had even improved on some of the permanent installations left by previous Corvin teams. When they returned to their transport ship, the entire monitoring fleet was waiting for them. Ships from dozens of species had arrived to witness the impossible. Carbon-based life forms surviving in conditions designed for living rock. The Corvin delegation was there too. Their leader approached Do-hyun as he emerged from the transport. "We have studied volcanic worlds for 1,000 years, the massive rock being said. Our bodies are made of living stone. We thought we understood what it meant to survive in such environments. You have shown us that we understand nothing." "You survive very well," Do-hyun replied diplomatically. "We just approach it differently." "How?" "Your bodies are soft. Your equipment is basic. By all logic, you should have died within hours." Heejin stepped forward. "Earth has volcanoes too. Lots of them. Humans have been living with volcanic activity for hundreds of thousands of years. We've learned to read the signs, to predict eruptions, to find safety in what looks like chaos. But the heat, the toxic air, the unstable ground. All problems that can be solved with knowledge and preparation," Jaewon said. The Corvin leader was quiet for a long moment. "We request permission to send a scientific expedition to Earth." "Why?" So-young asked. "Because we need to understand what kind of world creates beings like you." The journey back to Zerion Station was different from any previous transport. The humans were no longer passengers, they were celebrities. Delegations from dozens of species wanted to meet them, to ask questions, to understand how they had achieved the impossible. But the biggest shock was waiting for them at the station. Ambassador Thektar met them at the docking bay with an expression that looked like panic. "The Galactic Council has been in emergency session," he said. "The tournament is being suspended." "Why?" Do-hyun asked. "Because classes 10, 11, 12, and 13 exist in theory only. They were never meant to be attempted. They were created as mathematical models to represent conditions so extreme that no known form of life could survive them. And the Council is afraid that you might try to survive them anyway." The humans looked at each other. They had come this far. They had proven that humanity could survive anything the galaxy could imagine, but now the galaxy was too frightened to let them continue. "What if we want to try?" Do-hyun asked. Thektar made that grinding noise that meant he was extremely stressed. "That's what we're afraid of. Class 10 conditions include surface pressures that would crush starship hulls. Class 11 involves temperatures approaching absolute zero combined with radiation levels." The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted 3 days. Representatives from every major species argued about whether to allow the humans to continue. Some said it was too dangerous. Others said it was scientifically invaluable. Many were simply afraid of what they might discover about humanity. In the end, curiosity won over fear. "The humans will be allowed to attempt Class 10, Ambassador Thektar announced. "But this will be the most monitored event in galactic history. We'll have medical teams, emergency evacuation systems, and scientific observers from every major species." Class 10 had never been used before. The tournament officials had to build it specially, using mathematical models and theoretical physics to create conditions that pushed the boundaries of what matter could endure. The planet they chose was a rogue world that had been ejected from its solar system billions of years ago. It wandered through space alone, heated only by radioactive decay in its core. The surface pressure was 60 times Earth's atmospheric pressure at sea level. The temperature was minus 180 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere was liquid nitrogen mixed with hydrogen sulfide and other toxins. Most shocking of all, the gravity was 12 times Earth normal. No biological life form can function in 12G gravity, explained Dr. Vethnor, the Confederation's chief xenobiologist. The human heart cannot pump blood against that kind of force. Their bones will collapse. Their organs will be crushed. Maybe, said Do-hyun. We'll find out. The transport to Class 10 was unlike anything they had used before. It was essentially a mobile space station, equipped with life support systems, medical facilities, and emergency rescue equipment. The observation fleet included ships from 47 different species, all wanting to witness what would happen. When they reached the rogue planet, the humans spent 2 days studying the conditions and preparing their equipment. The pressure suits they would need were more like personal spacecraft than clothing. The life support systems were so complex that most species couldn't operate them. But humans had been to the deepest parts of Earth's oceans, where pressure could crush submarines. They had worked in space where a single mistake meant death. They understood how to function inside protective equipment when the environment outside was completely hostile to life. The landing was the hardest part. The gravity hit them the moment they left their transport. 12 times Earth normal meant that every step felt like carrying 11 extra people. Their hearts had to work 12 times harder to pump blood. Their lungs had to fight against 12 times the normal pressure just to expand. But humans had trained for this too. Astronauts learned to function under high G-forces. Deep-sea divers worked under crushing pressure. Emergency responders operated in conditions that pushed human physiology to its limits. The first hour was brutal. The humans moved slowly, taking frequent rests, conserving their strength. The monitoring teams expected them to collapse or request evacuation within minutes. Instead, they began setting up their camp. Vital signs are stressed but stable, reported the medical monitoring team. Heart rates elevated but not dangerous. Oxygen levels good. They're adapting to the conditions. Jaewon built their shelter using techniques designed for the deepest ocean, trenches on Earth. The structure had to withstand not just the crushing gravity but also the extreme pressure of the liquid nitrogen atmosphere. It was like building a submarine that could also function as a space station. Hyejin worked on their life support systems, finding ways to extract oxygen from the toxic atmosphere and recycle their air supply more efficiently. The techniques she used came from research on Earth's most extreme environments, places where humans had learned to survive in conditions that seemed impossible. Soo-young established communication with the monitoring fleet, adapting her equipment to work through the dense atmosphere and intense gravitational fields. The signals had to fight through conditions that bent space-time itself. Do-hyun organized their activities, making sure his team didn't exhaust themselves fighting the crushing gravity. Every movement had to be planned and efficient. Every action had to conserve energy and resources. By the end of the second day, they had not only survived Class 10, but had established a functional base camp. They were collecting scientific data, maintaining their equipment, and even exploring the immediate area around their landing site. "This is impossible," said Dr. Vethnor, reviewing the monitoring reports. "According to every biological model we have, they should be dead." "Perhaps our models are wrong," suggested Ambassador Thektar. The real test came on the third day. A massive storm system moved across their location, bringing winds that would have been hurricane force even in normal gravity. Combined with the crushing pressure and toxic atmosphere, it created conditions that the mathematical models said would destroy any known material. The humans rode out the storm inside their shelter, making minor adjustments to keep their systems functioning. When it passed, they emerged and continued their work as if nothing had happened. "They're treating Class 10 like a normal work environment," reported one of the observers. "They've established routines, divided responsibilities, and are proceeding with their tasks systematically." But the humans knew they were reaching their limits. The constant crushing gravity was exhausting. Their bodies were working at maximum capacity just to function. They could survive Class 10, but they couldn't thrive there the way they had on previous worlds. When the challenge period ended, they returned to their transport with relief. Class 10 had been the hardest thing they had ever done. "How do you feel?" asked the medical team. "Tired," Do-hyun admitted. That was difficult, but you survived it. Yes. The news of their Class 10 success sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. If humans could survive conditions that should have been impossible for biological life, what did that mean for everyone's understanding of physics and biology? More importantly, there were still 3 more classes. The debate over Class 11 was even more intense than the debate over Class 10. Class 11 conditions included gravity so intense that time moved differently. The surface of the test world would experience time dilation. Minutes there would equal hours in normal space. The humans would not only have to survive impossible conditions, they would have to do it while experiencing relativistic effects that had never been tested on biological life forms. "This is beyond science," said Dr. Vethnor. "This is testing the fundamental nature of reality." But the humans wanted to try. Class 11 took place near a neutron star, on a planet whose gravity was so intense that the monitoring fleet had to stay thousands of kilometers away to avoid being pulled in. The humans would land on the surface for what they experienced as 6 hours, but would return to find that 2 days had passed for everyone else. The protective equipment required was so advanced that it had to be specially designed by the galaxy's best engineers. It was less like a suit and more like a personal force field generator, designed to counteract gravitational effects that could tear apart atomic bonds. The landing was successful, but communication with the surface became almost impossible due to the gravitational effects on radio waves. The monitoring teams could only watch from a distance as 4 small figures moved around on the surface of a world where physics itself was distorted. For 6 subjective hours, the humans explored conditions that no conscious being had ever experienced. They collected data on how matter behaved under extreme gravitational stress. They tested the limits of their equipment and their own biology in an environment that existed at the edge of scientific possibility. When they returned, 48 hours had passed for the rest of the galaxy. The humans had experienced something that changed their understanding of space and time itself. "What was it like?" asked Thektar. "Strange," Suyong replied. "Time felt thick, like moving through honey. Every action took enormous effort, not just because of the gravity, but because time itself was resisting us, and you survived it. We adapted to it." The success on Class 11 broke something in galactic civilization. The fundamental assumptions about what life could endure, about the limits of biological existence, about the nature of survival itself, all of it had to be reconsidered. Class 12 was designed to be the absolute limit of possibility. The conditions were so extreme that matter itself became unstable. The test site was a neutron star fragment where gravity approached the point where atoms would collapse into neutronium. The humans shouldn't have been able to land on such a world. They shouldn't have been able to exist there. The mathematical model said that their bodies would be converted into exotic matter within minutes, but they had gotten this far. The galaxy was watching. Earth was waiting for news. They landed on Class 12 in suits that were marvels of engineering, protected by fields that pushed the boundaries of galactic technology. They spent 4 hours, experienced as several days due to extreme time dilation, in conditions that rewrote physics textbooks. When they returned, they were no longer just humans who had survived impossible conditions. They were beings who had experienced the edge of reality and returned to tell about it, but there was still Class 13. The final challenge was more than a test of survival. It was a test of whether organized matter could exist in the most extreme conditions imaginable.